What's going on, everybody? Hi, welcome to the program. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It is July 14th, 2026, and welcome back once again to the world of video games. And whatever is going on around them, I don't know. It's pretty different things. Video games aren't the real world. Everyone knows that. Video games are completely untouched by anything that's happening in the actual real world. Yeah, that's how that works, right? It has been hot here. I don't know. We dodged the heat wave last week that seemed to be sweeping through most of the rest of the nation, and then it has been 90s creeping up on triple digits around here, which has been fun. Everyone gets restless. The kids get crazy. My son had a crazy bad dream last night and came running downstairs at 2 a.m, freaking out. He's okay. He's doing fine. But it's been that kind of that kind of has set the tone for the mentality going around, I guess. Everyone's just going crazy, but we are here. We're doing our thing. And we're living with the Steam machine now. I got my Steam machine that I purchased from Valve Corp. And the Steam machine is pretty interesting. I wrote a review of sorts of the Steam machine. You can find that over at jeff.zone. That's a free post, but that is the Patreon. If you want to support the show and get an ad-free version of this very podcast, head over to jeff.zone. You get the podcast. If you join the advisory panel, you can suggest Nintendo 64 games for the Friday streams and everything in between. Head on over and check it out at jeff.zone. The Steam machine is pretty much what you would expect it to be. I think if you've been following the Steam Deck, or if you own a Steam Deck, then I think you have a really good idea of what the Steam machine is and what it's capable of. And I think what its limitations are. It's a more powerful device than the Steam Deck. I think, that's obviously, one of the things they said out of the gate is that it's obviously the hardware, the internals are better than a Steam Deck. Obviously, it doesn't have a screen, so it's meant to be hooked up to a screen. They just made a computer, but really, this is the sort of thing that you're kind of supposed to be hooking up to a television. It's you could certainly hook up a mouse and keyboard to it, and it has DisplayPort on the back as well as HDMI. So if you're looking to plug it into a traditional regular PC monitor, you can totally do that. But I don't think that's. I have to imagine that people doing that are going to be kind of in the minority. Because this is something that is, the pitch to me has always been, hey, we're making a consoleized version of the PC platform, and we're doing it without Windows, which is super exciting. And to me, that is the truly exciting thing about Valve's push completely into this hardware, whether it's the Steam Deck or the machine or even Steam Frame to a certain degree from the sounds of that. It is this idea that they are pushing ahead and finding ways to get Windows games to run really well on not Windows. They've got their own flavor of Linux, and they're doing all of this compatibility work to make that, to shore that up. And that comes with caveats, obviously. If you've been following this stuff, you know that there are going to be games that are incompatible with this setup. Games that require you to be running proper real Windows. Typically, that is games that have like anti-cheat technology built in. And so that's a list like Battlefield, Marathon, Destiny 2, Call of Duty, the new release of the recent release of Dead or Alive 6 that replaced the other version of Dead or Alive 6. Is not compatible. And there are games that have anti-cheat technology built in that do work. Though sometimes you have to jump through some hoops to make that stuff work. And so it kind of, I think this whole thing is all fucked up, man. it shouldn't be this way. The Steam machine should not be $1,000. The power inside of the Steam machine is nice. And, you know, if you haven't upgraded your PC in a long time, you know, Valve says that when they were speccing out this machine in the first place, they were looking at the Steam hardware survey and saying, actually, for a great number of players that are using Steam every day or using Steam, this is going to be an upgrade for them. This is going to be a better machine than the one that they're running. And so if you're in that boat, you know, it's kind of a different story, right? But it's not as powerful as a PlayStation 5 Pro, and it is more expensive than a PlayStation 5 Pro. That to me is kind of one of the numbers that, you know, and again, there's so much nuance in trying to find a way, like writing about the Steam machine and trying to figure out, okay, am I recommending this thing or not? And who should buy a Steam machine and who shouldn't buy a Steam machine? Like, there's so many different people out there in different situations that it is very difficult to just make a blanket recommendation. And so what I'll say is, I think the Steam machine is really rad, but also, if you're thinking about it, and you're probably not, but if you're thinking about this as like, hey, I'm going to get I don't play PC games. I'm going to get this thing and it's going to be just like a console and I'm going to plug it in and it's going to go. I think that is just kind of not the case for a couple of different reasons. I ran through a handful of games, and I did mention this in the review, that like the first 3 games I tried to play on the Steam machine did not work out of the box, despite having check marks. They have like a little validation system where they verify, like, hey, yes, this game supports this hardware. You should be able to play it. And the first 3 games I tried were the first Descendant, naturally, that piece of shit video game. That piece of shit video game actually uses a lot of hardware bells and whistles, and with ray tracing and a lot of other stuff. So it has the reason I kind of keep coming back to it is because I've been jumping from hardware to hardware, trying out different settings and stuff, and knowing what it looks like on a high-end PC and then being able to see what it looks like reduced. It's just become kind of this weird test bed game for me of sorts. Plus there's feet. And that game did not run at all out of the box, despite being verified. Now, there's a twofold I have to get super specific about this stuff. Again, I wish that there was like a really blanket kind of boilerplate thing to talk about here. But these edge cases are so edge cases that it's just this huge fucking rabbit hole that we're gonna have to dive into a little bit about this stuff. And I'm not even giving you frame rate numbers and stats and all the hard science shit. The first Descendant, okay, the Steam machine right now, you have multiple branches. You can be on the stable branch of the Steam machine software, or you can opt into like the beta branch or the preview branch. If you have a Steam Deck, you may be familiar with this concept. And so you can test out advanced versions of the software before they're ready for the general public. When you get your Steam machine, as it stands today, and this will probably change in the relatively near future, it does not show Steam machine specific compatibility information. It shows Steam OS specific information. And so that means, like, does it run on Linux, I guess, as opposed to does it run on a Steam Deck or does it run on a Steam machine? For that specific thing, Valve has rated it as compatible. And so there's a check mark next to it. It does not run on a Steam machine out of the box. If you download it and hit play, the check mark is there. It does not run. I had to download a third-party compatibility tool called GE Proton, which, again, none of this is going to be new to you if you have a Steam Deck. But I had to drop the desktop mode and go download a thing and install a thing. And, you know, I had to do some proper computing to make that game work. On the other side of that, the game does boot, but like none of the options at your disposal are good. You can fuck around with FSR all day long to upscale it, but the game starts to take on some dreamy, blurry, AI-generated look to it if you fuck with the setting. If you crank the FSR too high, it looks like a fucking nightmare. It's like It's like those videos where people go like, this is what it looked like when I took DMT. You're like, oh, great. And if you turn all of that stuff off, it does not run at an acceptable frame rate. And so you're sort of, stuck in the middle on that one. And that's how it was on the Steam Deck. They did not verify it on Steam Deck and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you opt into the beta branch of the Steam Machine software, it does populate with Steam Machine specific compatibility information. And once you do that, the First Descendant is no longer a verified game. So it seems like they know, like, oh, yeah, this game is all fucked up, or, like whatever, it runs like shit, or the feed are not good enough, whatever their criteria is. And so that was kind of a weird one, because I was like, oh, did they unverify it right before my eyes? What the hell happened? And I realized, because I had been switching back and forth between stable and beta, like, oh, okay, stable doesn't have the compatibility info populated yet. Okay, I see. Weird. The second game I tried was Virtua Fighter 5, which if you download that game is listed as verified. And if you download it and you run it and you push the button marked play, it just launches, like, you see what is supposed to be a tiny window in the middle of a PC monitor, but because everything is full screen on these devices, it blows up this low-res little box to full screen and says, like, can't find the anti-cheat module. It gives you some kind of error. You have to go, and I had to do this on the Steam Deck as well. You have to go to protondb.com, which is a community website where people report their compatibility findings with all of the different flavors of Linux and Proton, your compatibility stuff, your Bazites, your Cashy OS, all that sort of stuff, as well as Steam Machine and Steam Deck. It's an amazing website. It is huge for this stuff. If you go there, you see a bunch of people saying, oh, if you want this game to run, you need to go into the command line options and make it say Steam Deck equals 1, and then ampersand command ampersand to pass things through or whatever. Again, this is a game that is listed as verified by Valve. It does not work unless you go to a third-party website, find the magic words, the special incantations, and then type that into the box. Which, again, if you're tinkering, if you're doing PC stuff, this is old hat. You're like, okay, yeah, I don't know, some shit went down. It's like this is some computing. But when we're talking about a device that I think at its highest, the best version of this device, you don't have to do any of that. You're just pushing a button and it's going. And I think that there's the expectation for this product is that it needs to eventually get there. The third game I tried was Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. On first boot, it locked up. It booted. It eventually popped up a screen that says can't sync achievements. And I couldn't, none of the buttons would bring the interface up. It was basically like soft locked at that point. And so I had to get up and hold down the power button to force a reboot in order to reboot it. On second boot, booted up just fine, and the game runs really well. It scales really nicely down to, this hardware. I've been playing it on a PS5 Pro and on this PC, which has a 5090 in it. And the performance on the Steam Machine is nice. I mean, the resolution is what it is, and you have to adjust the settings, but you can get good frame rate and still get like good image quality out of it. And so that was pretty cool. Borderlands 4 was another one. Some games, Call of Duty does this all the time. I think Call of Duty is kind of the classic example of this, but more and more games do this, where they patch when you run them. You'll download patches off Steam and whatever, and games will patch, but sometimes you'll connect and it will check for like an in-place patch that it then grabs. NetherRealm games do this with balance updates sometimes, where they can just kind of throw in tweak some numbers without requiring you to go through a full patch process and without requiring them to go through certification on consoles and all that sort of stuff. Borderlands on first launch did that. It found a patch and it updated, and then it tries to reboot the game automatically. Instead, it tries to run a batch file. It can't run the batch file for whatever reason, and it just crashes to a command prompt that says, we couldn't run this thing. Like, okay. I also could not get out of the command prompt. I couldn't bring the Steam overlay up. I couldn't quit out of it. I was again kind of soft locked at that point. So I had to get up, hold down the power button, reboot it, and then on second boot, Borderlands 4 ran fine. For a game that ran like absolute shit at launch, I will say that on a Steam machine running at 1080p, like it scaled down pretty nicely and ran like pretty well for what it was, and so that was kind of impressive in its own right. But I guess like that's the thing, is there are a lot of things that run right out of the box. You push the button, they launch, they're fine. And then there are a lot of games that have like little bits and pieces of like, oh, this didn't work right. And on first boot, this did. I went through a process Sunday, where I was trying to get Street Fighter 6 to work. And every time I tried to launch the game, it would just crash, or it would launch and then go to a black screen and soft lock, and I would have to hold it and get out of this stuff. Ollie Gannett says you can hold the Steam button and hold B to force quit apps. You sure can, but not in these cases. That was not working. What I'm telling you, you had to get up and power cycle it. I'm not fucking around here. Come on. And so like Street Fighter 6, I went through a process of like booting it 10 times. Went from beta back to stable and tried to run it there. It had some problems. And then it just eventually magically started working, and I don't really know. Except I can't connect to the Battle Hub for some reason. I can play online matches if I go to the other screen and just directly search for ranked or casual matches, but I can't get into the lobbies. It just errors out, and I don't know. Maybe that's on Capcom's side. I did not try that on my other PC to see if it was working there or not, but there was something weird there. And Street Fighter 6 runs, fine. You can make some adjustments. You can turn it up from its default settings, and it'll still run okay. Out of the box, this thing is resolution capped to 1080p. There's a setting in the Steam settings where you kind of like, you basically are tricking the games into thinking that they're running on a 1080p monitor, and then Steam scales it up with their stuff. And by default, that is set to 1080p. In fact, Valve says that when they test their games for Steam machine verification, they test them at 1080p. Which, for a machine that until recently their website directly mentioned 4K until they removed mentions of that, I think, last week sometime. That's a little... I don't, looking at the specs, I don't think anyone was expecting to get 4K 60 out of every game on this thing, like clearly. And in the interviews and stuff, they said, hey, 1440p is a great, kind of middle ground for this stuff. But they don't by default, they do not allow you to run at 1440p. The games are rendering, internally at 1080p by default. And you can go raise that limit. And you can also change that on a per game basis, of course, because these are PC games, and you can, set the settings to whatever the hell you want. And so like it's capable. You could certainly set it to 4K, but and for games that are not demanding on the GPU, you may very well get good performance at 4K, but for a lot of more modern games, even games that are a couple of years old, at this point, like, you're not going to get full frame rate, smooth performance at 4K. It's just not going to work out. You can heavily deploy FSR in games that support that, and go through that process of figuring out if there's a good balance between image quality and frame rate that you're happy with. And, for some games, you'll be able to find that. But, at the end of the day, it's not a powerhouse. Like, this is not top of the line technology when it comes to like that sort of stuff. And so I think people need to know that going in. And I think that makes the price conversation even weirder, right? Because, again, not to say that it's like a like for like comparison, because I think the Steam ecosystem is generally friendlier and cooler than, say, PSN. But we've reached a point where you can get a PlayStation 5 Pro. You can get a professional PlayStation 5 for less money than a 512 gig Steam machine. And the PS5 Pro renders a lot of games at 4K. Some of those games are capable of running at 60 frames per second. Many of them run at 30 or somewhere in between the two. Assassin's Creed has that balanced setting that shoots for 40, and that works pretty well on PlayStation. Of course, on PlayStation, you also have to pay an annual fee just to play online, and every day that goes by, that somehow seems slightly more like a criminal act, but here we are. And yeah, I don't know. Again, I think that makes all of the trade-offs really fucking crazy around this thing, you know? And so I think the Steam Machine is... This is basically how I felt about the Steam Deck. And so the Steam Machine benefits from years of the Steam Deck existing, right? Because everything they've learned, every update to Proton, everything they've done with the Steam Deck, day one of the Steam Machine is significantly better than day one of the Steam Deck. You know, for example. But there's still a lot more work to do. And I think they're doing a lot of it. And to me, the impressive part about these efforts right now today, the part I can wholeheartedly recommend and say this is amazing, specifically is the part where Valve is saying we're going to make a genuine alternative to Windows. And it's going to take a long time, and it has taken a long time. It will continue, I'm sure, to take a long time. But for a lot of games, thousands of video games, plenty of mega popular video games, you can now play them on SteamOS. And so when they announced a few weeks ago, they're like, hey, with SteamOS, we are eventually going to lean into supporting more hardware. Right now, SteamOS is really built for the Steam Machine and the Steam Deck, and people have adapted it for things like Bazite, and found ways to kind of bring that experience to, you know, kind of more traditional desktop PCs or what have you. And that's been awesome as well. But generally speaking, it's meant to support the sort of hardware that you'll find in Steam machines or whatever, meaning not NVIDIA hardware. And they said specifically, hey, we're working closely with NVIDIA to bring better NVIDIA support into SteamOS. And so that's fucking awesome. I look at that and go like, yes, great. Okay, if we can get this compatibility stuff kind of in the, not, it'll be hard to get it in the rear view because there's always going to be weird edge cases and all this other stuff. But the more work that gets done there for more games to just work out of the box on Linux is amazing. Like it's just, they're doing amazing work. And it's been wonderful to watch. And to see that they're looking to bring it to more and more, you know, bring SteamOS to a wider array of hardware, I think is incredible. I think people have been disenfranchised with Windows 11 for a long time, but Windows 11 has been getting worse. You know? There's never been a better time to fucking get the fuck off Windows. And that's getting better every day. Little by little. Because there's a community of people providing these compatibility reports, because Valve is doing such great work with Proton and all of that sort of stuff. I think that, like, you can see it. The last step in the process, I think, will be, and there's a long road from here to there. I don't think they're there. You know, I don't think they're right around the corner. Like, there's a lot of work to be done. I don't want to like make it sound like it's just on the cusp, but in a lot of ways, it's getting there. The last domino to fall, the last two dominoes to fall, I guess I'll say. I think the one big one is NVIDIA support, better NVIDIA support, and the second one is whether you're getting developers to whatever the process is, supporting these games that cannot run for anti-cheat reasons. Finding ways, whatever that way is, whether it's developers warming up to the idea of their games running on Linux and figuring out ways to make that work, or Valve doing more voodoo crazy stuff in the background to figure out a way to make it go. I think that'll be the stuff, because that is kind of the other thing when you're recommending this to people. When you're talking about the Steam Machine, it does come with these caveats of like, well, do you like to play Call of Duty? I mean, a lot of people do. Are you interested in Battlefield? Do you want to play, like these big, like Fortnite doesn't work, right? Currently. Do you play fucking whatever shit show games Riot has these days? I think a lot of people do. I think they're all on Kick. You see that? Riot is partnering with fucking Kick. It's like Riot should have just put out a press release that says, hey, by the way, we're scumbags. Whoops. It's like super like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? Anyway, if you ever thought Riot was bad people, turns out maybe they are. I don't know. But like those games, all that sort of stuff is currently, I mean, that's not even on Steam, but like, you get my meaning. Those are games that are in many places very popular, and don't run on this device and don't run on this OS and all this other stuff. So like to truly get there, if we want to truly talk about getting there, that is what there looks like to me. If you're going to recommend to someone, hey, this is a game machine for all the games you play, I feel like it needs to have a shot at running all of the games. And right now that's just not the case. So I think, like it's a weird thing because I think it kind of shoots some holes in what I feel is the best use case. Like the best person to buy a Steam machine to me would be someone who has not really invested in the PC as a gaming platform. They mainly play on consoles and they're like, I want to check this shit out. It'd be nice to get these games a little bit earlier because a lot of them come out earlier on PC than they do on console. That's not always the case, but there are plenty of indie games that debut on PC and then, if they're popular, they make their way to console or whatever. I think that the Steam machine needs to fill that need, and I don't think it does. That's separate from the price conversation, because the price conversation obviously just shoots this whole thing full of blah blah blah. It's the whole thing, the whole conversation. Just throw the whole thing out right now, right? Like that's hard. That's a hard hump to get over, right? But I think, like, to me, that's the ideal person for this has been, someone who doesn't want to do all the technical stuff and they just want a box they can plug into a TV. It takes all the same plugins. I literally unplugged everything from the back of my Xbox Series X and plugged it into the Steam machine, power, HDMI, network, and that was it. It was like, yep, cool. This box is way smaller than this rectangle. And it's there and it's good. Of course, that's not even how Valve is positioning or selling the Steam machine right now, right? I mean, they're selling the Steam machine to people who are already on Steam. It's the only place you can go to buy one is Steam, or I guess eBay if you want to pay way too much money for one, because people are indeed scalping them. And they're kind of, like it becomes this different presentation of just like, hey, do you play PC games and you want to play them on your TV as well? Here's a way to do that. Or, or maybe because of some of the stuff they've said about the hardware survey and the specs of the Steam machine, perhaps you are in a boat where this is technically an upgrade. And so, if we're talking about building a PC and these prices and stuff like that starts to get fuzzy as well. Like, maybe a Steam machine would be a solid upgrade for you if you have an older PC and you're not looking to play top-of-the-line games. You can certainly play Cyberpunk on this thing. It will not have every bell and or whistle enabled, but like, whatever. I think that's been the last 6 months. The last 6 months of me messing around with the Steam machine, installing Bazite on my secondary PC that's hooked up to a television as well. Like jumping through all of these hoops and really kind of fucking around with this stuff has kind of broken me of the like every setting must be set all the way to high, or what am I doing with my life? Like that kind of quest for power. It is broken me of that. And I'm finding, because I'm sitting in front of this 4K TV with the Steam machine hooked up to it. At 1080p, the games look noticeably pixelated. In a lot of cases, with the default resolution cap of 1080 and everything like that, sometimes these games look like Switch 2 games. Like Borderlands 4 is a great example. Like if the Switch 2 version of Borderlands 4 ever appears, I bet it'll look quite a bit like the way it runs on a Steam machine. Where you go like, oh yeah, this is funky. This looks, like Doom the Dark Ages runs surprisingly well on a Steam machine, but there's some haze, the draw distance is brought in a little bit. They fog it up like it's Turok or something there. And that's not something you get with the settings turned all the way up on PC, but it runs really well. And you're like, hey, this is actually pretty neat. And so it's been interesting to see some of those trade-offs and finding situations where it's like, no, this game is perfectly playable. You can still enjoy this game to the exact degree that you would enjoy it, whether you spent fucking $5,000 on a GPU or whatever, however much they charge for these fucking things these days, or if you bought a Steam machine. And so like the price conversation isn't even as straightforward as this thing is too expensive, because ultimately everything's too expensive. And so on that sliding scale, for me, the best point of comparison really has been the PS5 Pro, because it is slightly cheaper, not much. It is slightly cheaper than the cheapest model, the least expensive model, I guess is the right way to say that, of Steam Deck. But it is more powerful. And so that's kind of a weird, that becomes a very strange trade-off. But if you already have a lot of PC games, if you're already heavily invested in the Steam ecosystem, which again has the friendliest return policy of any of the major gaming platforms. Also, of course, Steam has a library of just tons of fucking games. The Steam controller, if you decide to get one of those with one of these, it like can enable you to play games you didn't think would be possible to play on a controller in front of a TV. Some of these mouse and keyboard games come in surprisingly well, but that's kind of a separate conversation. We've already talked about the Steam controller, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. And so it just becomes a series of very fuzzy comparisons. Like someone should build a BuzzFeed quiz, and that the answer is like, should you buy a Steam machine, yes or no? Because there's so many little checkpoints, and like what do you value, this or this? How much money you're looking to spend, this or this? And those numbers are actually kind of exactly the same. So too bad. What do you how do you feel about paying to play online games? There's a lot of little checkpoints there that could tilt you in one direction or another. But if you don't play multiplayer games and you're not necessarily looking to play but I guess like even that's not always the case. I was going to say, if you're not necessarily looking to play the newest, latest video games, then the Steam machine is for you. But it runs Forza Horizon 6 quite well. Running that at 1440p, I'm getting mostly 60 frames a second with some of the FSR stuff turned on to, mostly like quality oriented settings, not to performance. So you can certainly you'll see some frame rate dips down to like 55 or so. But you can iron that out too if you want to mess with the settings a little bit more. And so it's a very viable way to play Forza Horizon 6. It doesn't look as good as it does on this PC over here, where I can turn it up all the way and DLAA the fuck out of it and all that other shit, right? But it still looks really good. It's still very playable. However, it also doesn't look quite as good as it looks on an Xbox Series X. And so that's the comparison that keeps like gnawing at me. You're like, hey, this thing is more expensive than the modern consoles. Even after all of these price increases, this thing is still slightly more expensive than that. And like, just fidelity-wise, the comparisons are not favorable to the Steam machine. The Steam machine has a ton of other interesting things that work out in its favor, obviously, mostly because of the ecosystem and Steam, and because it is an open platform and you can do all kinds of wild shit to you. You can sort of do that with an Xbox Series X. You get it into developer mode and jump through a bunch of weird hoops. You could install RetroArch on it, I guess. Yeah, but ultimately at the end of the day, this is a computer, and so you can do whatever the fuck you want with it, pretty much, and that's exciting as well. So that's a point in its favor that like these closed ecosystem consoles are never going to give you. So I don't have like a nice, easy solution to this situation. I think that you'll probably know if this is for you or not. And that's a shortcut I can take because I think most of the people that listen to this podcast are fairly, let's say, well-read when it comes to some of this stuff. And but if I had to make a recommendation, if Canadian radio and television called me back and said, "Hey, why don't you come on and talk about the Steam Machine?" I would be a little more like, you got to know what you're getting into. You got to make sure that you got to make sure that you are really ready for this, because you might have to look some stuff up. Or be ready to use Steam's refund policy, which I hope that they don't lean back on that too much. The return policy helps them solve a lot of problems where it's like, oh, I bought this game and it wasn't compatible with the Steam machine. You're like, I'll refund it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, but it was verified. Yeah, just refund it. Like, okay. Hopefully the verification process picks up steam and works better and all that sort of stuff, because I found, even with the Steam Deck, I just found a handful of situations where like the information was incorrect. And that's something that can change from patch to patch. Like they update a game and it's like, oh, this doesn't, like you updated this game and now it doesn't run on a Steam machine anymore. What happens then? With that'll you'll have played it for 2 hours and you'll be out of the refund range. But what happens? What happens if it's a game you've played a lot of and then it gets patched in such a way that it no longer runs on the device? Like, what do you do then? Like there's just a lot of stuff like that you just look at and go like, they need to be very transparent and they need to be on it. They need to make sure that whether that's working with developers or whatever the process is for Steam verification, like that's something that can change over the course of a game's lifespan. And that can be scary, but it's also super exciting. Like the potential for all of this stuff is so great. And that to me is the most powerful part about this whole process, whether that's the Steam machine, the Steam Deck, whatever. Again, to sum it all up, I think the software work that Valve is doing with Proton and all of the compatibility stuff that they are working on is fucking amazing. Mind-blowing stuff. And that's a victory no matter how you slice it. Whether the OS is for you and whether the machines that Valve is selling are for you becomes a much muddier conversation right now, again, because of that price. It's a really rad little box. It's surprisingly small. It's way smaller than I thought it would even be. And that's awesome. But at the end of the day, it's very expensive. And that makes it difficult to recommend over some of the other options that are in that kind of wheelhouse price wise. Again, whether that's an Xbox or a PlayStation. That's sort of the rub, right? But that's my feeling on it. I'm letting my kids use it. And, because I actually still have that Windows PC that boots to Steam Big Picture hooked up. And so I can kind of A/B go back and forth and whatever. But I'm letting my kids play games on the Steam machine, mostly because I'm curious about how some of that stuff works and if they run into weird processes. One thing I'll say is some games are old in a way that they were just not prepared to run full screen on like even Steam Big Picture mode in Windows is not like A Hat in Time. Do you remember A Hat in Time? It's kind of a platformer. It's incredibly awkward. It's like, I think it might be a really bad game. I can't tell yet, but my son fucking loves it. A Hat in Time doesn't like it will not adjust to show controller prompts instead of keyboard, like mouse and keyboard prompts most of the time. And that's extremely fucking frustrating. But that's not necessarily related to the Steam machine per se. That's something that happens in Steam Big Picture mode on Windows as well. It's just kind of a problem with that game. But yeah, I don't know. It's like you run into some stuff like that that's just like, hey man, I don't know. PC games are crazy sometimes. You know, it's not necessarily something that is related to the current conversation around all of this. But again, when we get back to that idea of a simple box you plug into your television that someone who's only played console games can now experience the wonderful world of Steam, there's just a lot of fucking weird shit just that you run into, right? Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about more retro video games. Iron Galaxy out here porting retro video games. We'll be back after this. Starting a new business and selling stuff online can be daunting. You know, there are a lot of different tools out there. You can build your own, go all these different directions when it comes to, you know, securely taking credit card information and, you know, people's mailing addresses and all this other stuff. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be this daunting nightmare, because you can use Shopify. That's right, Shopify, the most powerful storefront known to mankind. With one of the most powerful checkouts in the history of checkouts, Shopify Checkout helps more customers finish their purchase. And when they come back, their details are already saved. So one tap and they are done. Shopify handles the setup and the checkout, so you've got more time to focus on growing your business and the tools to do it. They give you a ton of tools, analytics to let you know, hey, how are these things selling? And also, they'll help you track your inventory. If you've got stuff that you're selling online as well as stuff that you're selling in the storefront, they can make sure that those two things stay on the right side so you don't end up overselling stuff, which is super, super handy. A ton of tools to make sure that you've got a beautiful storefront. And again, the greatest checkout in the business. Shopify powers millions of businesses worldwide, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to small businesses just getting started. With Shopify, nothing stands between your idea and a real business, so go make it one. Start your free trial at shopify.com/Jeff. Start your free trial. That's right, a free trial at shopify.com/Jeff. That's shopify.com/Jeff. All right, we're back. Video games, they're getting older all the time. After a bunch of leaks and persistent rumors and what have you, new releases of Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and Call of Duty Black Ops 2 appeared on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 storefronts last week. This almost was kind of there was not a lot of fanfare. The store just sort of updated and they were out. And so these retro classics, Black Ops 1 was released in 2010 and Black Ops 2 in 2012, are now back. These are not remasters. These are not remakes. These are ports. They run at a higher resolution than the original PlayStation 3 games did, or Xbox 360, I suppose. Well, anyway. They're rendering at 1080p, which I think the PS3 versions of those games were rendering at like 900p or something weird like that. And so they look like sharp versions of old games. Little things on the menus have been updated in weird ways to fit the kind of PlayStation requirements to ship games. Instead of saying press start button, it says press options button, little shit like that. And they're selling these separately. And what's more, they're selling DLC separately. It's a real racket. These games are like $40 each. However, they are at a discount of half off if you have PlayStation Plus. That's a limited time offer, I guess. So eventually these things will be straight up 40 bones. And also they're selling the season passes. The season pass content is already out. It's not like they're going to be releasing DLC over the next year. But if you want those maps, you got to give them another $10. That's how much it is right now. Again, I think even that price is going to go up. It's a really awkward release. I think that in a lot of ways the pricing, like again, these are really no frills versions of these games. They run. There's some minor changes, like people are going hog wild. People are losing their minds, saying things like, "Oh, the ray gun in this zombies map is green when it was only supposed to be green in this map and this map, but it's green on every map." And so there's that, and the perk icons are higher resolution, and they're these modern updated versions that appeared in this other thing instead of the original whatever. And so there's little bits and pieces like that. But generally speaking, they are very straightforward ports of Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. There's been a fun thing that's happened over the last few days. Now, these are only on PlayStation, because on Xbox, these games are backwards compatible. So if you own the original versions of those games, you can just run them on a Xbox, no problem. You can't do that with the PlayStation 3 versions of these games, and so hence why they decided to re-release and resell this stuff. The other problem that I was hoping we would get away from is when you look at the Xbox versions of these games, they are hacked all to hell. People, like you've been able to modify, you've been able to hack and modify an Xbox 360 for a lot of years, and a PlayStation 3 for just as long, if not even longer. And as a result, when you connect to servers in these games, pretty much any this Call of Duty game from this era, you're probably getting onto some weird modified server that someone has hacked together using, whatever stuff that they can do. And so you end up in these situations. I ran into this on the Xbox version of Modern Warfare 2, I want to say. Anyway, it creates a situation where, like, you shoot a guy and all of a sudden you're max level. Or they can set up a situation where you shoot a guy and lose all your XP and are in the hole so far that you'll never get out of level 1 ever again. There's more dangerous stuff that can be done with some of this business, which is not great. But the Xbox versions of these games have been a shit show in that way. And that carries forward because they're backwards compatible. When you go on a Series X to try to play these games, you're still connecting to Xbox 360 players who are running their modded lobbies with all fucking kinds of crazy bullshit. And so I was doing this, I was playing Black Ops 2 on Xbox, I don't know, a month or two ago. And I spawned into a team deathmatch, and I had infinite ammo and infinite grenades. I don't know why, I just did. And it lasted for about 4 matches, and then it stopped. Maybe the hosts migrated. I don't know. But I ran around that boat throwing grenades like a motherfucker. And I was like, this is broken. I'm having a great time. This is so broken. So you would think these re-releases on PlayStation would not have this problem. However, people have found a way to... and this is largely because it's available on the PlayStation 4. These do not connect to the original PS3 versions of the game, but they do cross-play between PS4 and PS5. Now, PlayStation 5 games have solved this problem. Like, Sony solved this issue. The PlayStation 4, you could get your save file, decrypt it, modify it, re-encrypt it, re-sign it to work and be a part of your profile, and then get online and play. There were people that were doing this in some ways to hack trophies, to be like, oh, I'm going to finish this game really fast and get all the trophies or whatever. There were people selling these tools. You would buy a subscription to a cheat tool that they would then update with new cheats all the time. One of the last games I remember, so I subscribed to one of these for a year because I wanted to see it. This was a long time ago. Well, I guess, like this was when the fucking Avengers game, when Square's Avengers game came out. was the last time I remember seeing this working. So 2020, I guess. And it was stuff where you could like modify your inventory or whatever. And you know, for the games that worked in, it was all game specific cheats. You know, you could probably hex edit the saves yourself if you wanted to. But they eventually, I want to say this eventually kind of stopped working because they patched it in firmware or whatever the deal was. But anyway, long story short, you can modify PS4 saves in some circumstances. And so I think what the vector is that people are modifying their PS4 saves to fuck up these lobbies and have been able to do so in the current and modern, you know, these reissues of Black Ops 1 and 2. It's primarily been happening, I guess, in domination mode. So as a response to this, they've disabled some playlists that were being affected by these cheats, and they're ostensibly working on a patch of some kind, which is very funny to have to work on a patch for a new version of a game that came out in 2010. Beyond that, it is a re-release of Black Ops 1 and 2. And it sounds like that these have been pretty popular. They shot kind of right to the top of the PlayStation sales charts immediately after their release. I don't know if they're still there or whatever, but like it seems like that they were fairly popular. I've mostly found, I put a few hours into each game. I put a few hours into both Black Ops and Black Ops 2. And my experience has been, boy, you can't go home again. Also, it's very funny how many of these maps are in the current Call of Duty game, because they're always re-releasing maps and updating maps and doing all of this other stuff. And so in some cases, you're like, I just played a match on this map last week, and I really miss the speed of current Call of Duty. You don't remember just how fucking slow those games are until you literally go back and play them and realize, like, oh yeah, I could run and take like 7 or 8 steps before I was out of breath and could not run anymore. And that's a little frustrating. Just the walk speed, the run speed, all of that sort of stuff. And I don't think it's slow in a way that you're like, oh, it's so tactical. It's just like, nah, I don't. Like, it just feels kind of sluggish to me. And I think there are a lot of people, especially, I don't know, older players who feel kind of iced out by, the current direction that Call of Duty has been going in. That, the popularity of these ports seem to indicate that people are like, oh, this is what it meant to be like. Get on the game. We're going to say some slurs. Let's get out there, like whatever. And I've seen a lot of positivity around these ports. Some people are trying to say, I don't think the numbers for this are publicly available. So I don't really have a good indication as to whether this is true or not, but people are trying to say that more people are playing Black Ops 1 and 2 on PlayStation than are playing Black Ops 7 across all platforms. I guess it's certainly possible because, again, I don't think this is a particularly great year for Call of Duty. Black Ops 7 has been something of a disappointment. But I would still rather play that game. As it turns out, to my surprise, I would not have anticipated this reaction. But going back and playing Black Ops 1 especially, I have been like, yeah, I think I would rather be playing modern Call of Duty than this. The options at your disposal are richer and more engaging. There's just a lot more fucked up shit you get to do with your creative class, and the choices and gun modifications and stuff are exciting. One thing I'll say, man, you go back to Black Ops 2. a lot of these games have a lot of Call of Duty games have had functionality, whether it's a perk or a gun attachment or whatever, for flinch less when you get shot. Which, you know, if you're aiming down sights at an enemy and you get shot, it knocks your aim off. It's crazy how reduced that concept is in modern Call of Duty, because when you're aiming down sights in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and you get shot, the gun just goes like a fucking foot in the air and you're like, oh shit, I can't hit anything. Well, holy shit. Like, I forgot that it was like that. They have a perk in there that makes you flinch less when you get hit, but I never used it because it was never a problem. But now, after years of that not being a thing, like, oh boy. That stuff is pretty hard to fucking go back to. But like, I don't know, like those games are certainly still compelling. It's just for me, it's a lot of the speed and some of the map variety that kind of makes it leaves me with a feeling of just like, and I feel like I'm having a better time playing current Call of Duty over the last couple of years than going back to this has been. They rolled out a Black Ops Classic playlist in Black Ops 7 that takes that removes some of the I think it takes out the wall runs, and it removes some of the gear and whatever. And that's like a funny playlist to have now, because you could just be playing actual fucking Black Ops Classic in Black Ops 1 and 2 instead of a weird playlist inside of that game. But I really like the Omni movement. I liked it when they rolled it out initially, and now like the game feels slow and like it feels way worse without it. The ability to kind of like run backwards, sideways, like the movement options you have at your disposal nowadays are just fucking fun. I don't know. And so it's hard to lose some of that sort of stuff, or rather, like, I don't, you know, I have a lot of nostalgia for those games. Most of my nostalgia is locked up in Modern Warfare 1 and 2. Not so much Black Ops 1. I mean, Black Ops 1 and 2 are great games. The campaigns are there too. You can certainly play those. They've got trophies, all that sort of shit. I have not touched the campaigns. But yeah, like I said, it's hard to go home again. For sure. But you know, you can download Black Ops 1, and Ice Cube is one of the announcers in multiplayer sometimes, depending on which team you're on and which map you're on and whatever. And it's great to hear him talk about spy planes being in the air. So that was fantastic. I kind of want to play through the Black Ops 1 campaign and unlock all the weird terminal window email checking, like Zork stuff, because that is such a great campaign that I do. And Black Ops 2 is also like one of the best campaigns they've ever done, just from an ideas perspective. So yeah, those are out, and you can theoretically get them if you want on PlayStation. But again, like, these are not remakes, these are not reissues. They kind of dropped with zero fanfare, which is just sort of weird. There's sort of like why did they do this? And they seem to have sold well enough that I feel like the answer is clear. Where it's like, oh, they did this because it's like, because people bought the shit out of these games, turns out. I'm sure they've probably already turned a profit on these. I can't imagine that, you know, it's not a full remake. I imagine that the scope of this project was not super expensive. Anyway, it's neat that they did it. They should update the Xbox versions, though. Like, if they want to get away from these hacked servers and cheats and all this other stuff, they should put these on Xbox. It's weird that they didn't. But I guess maybe that would be a tacit admission of like, oh, by the way, yeah, those were fucked, and we're not going to go back and ban all the hackers on the Xbox 360 because who has the time? But instead, we'll just move you over to these other servers. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. They should do it. They should do that. Fuck it, put it out on PC while you're at it. I mean, they're charging enough fucking money for these things. Like, Like, why not, right? And hopefully they'll fix the problems with, the hacking stuff, because it obviously needs that. Let's take another break, and we'll come back and we'll get into the news. Sometimes eating healthy does not fit in with a life on the go, right? You've got all the stuff you need sitting in your fridge, sitting in a cupboard somewhere, but as you get to the end of the day, you're wiped out. You do not have time or energy to make proper food. Happens all the time. Factor solves this problem. Factor delivers fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs right to your door. And so with Factor, I can hit my nutrition goals this season, without all the planning, a ton of grocery runs, or cooking. They've got a great weekly menu that is always updating with exciting new stuff. A creamy lemon pepper chicken is on this week's menu. Paprika beef and pepper goulash macaroni. How about a bacon ranch burger, a shredded chicken taco bowl? Oh, don't even get me started on the add-ons. They've got pancake bundles, so if you want to do breakfast. They've got some protein shakes and juices and stuff for that kind of morning action. And that's awesome. They have meals built around your goals, whether that's, weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or even GLP-1 support. They even have a Muscle Pro collection for strength and workout recovery. Each meal is crafted with functional ingredients like lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. It's just nutrient-dense food, It's fresh. It's never frozen. They have over 100 rotating weekly meals. So there's always something new to check out. They've got ready-to-eat salads with vibrant ingredients like elote corn and miso edamame. Plus, like 70 add-ons to round out in that nutrition. Again, those juices, they got peanut butter energy bites, all kinds of stuff. The meals are ready in 2 minutes. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything you love this summer. It's awesome, The box shows up, you get it in your fridge, and then from there, you're just good to go. With great food that is easy to prepare. No more excuses. Just pull it out, eat it up, and eat it. Doesn't really get much easier than that. Head to factormeals.com/JeffG50off and use the code JeffG50off to get 50% off and a free daily greens per box. Yeah. With new subscription only, while supplies last until September 27th, 2026. See website for more details, huh? All right. So I appeared on the videogameschronicle.com podcast last week, where Jordan and I spoke about, the Steam machine and some of the Xbox news from last week and what have you. But I also, the other news there is that I'm back on the sauce, baby. I can drink energy drinks again. I always could, it turns out. Turns out the health stuff was a bit of a false alarm. At least on that specific front. But I've spent a month and a half taking my blood pressure and being like, okay, yeah, it's actually way lower than it was the day when the day I went to the doctor, where it was extremely high that one day, largely because, seemingly because there was a fire in the neighborhood, and I had spent the last 2 days listening to fire scanners and freaking out and all this other stuff, which probably doesn't help. I don't know, but a weird thing has happened, man. I cut out caffeine for about a month and a half, I think, is what it ended up being. and then I had a cup of coffee, and then I had like a diet Pepsi and a couple other things, and I drank a Rockstar, and I'm going to stop ranking energy drinks at least for a little bit. We'll see if I get back into them deep, then I will probably start ranking them again. But I drank the Rockstar Pure Zero Fruit Punch, which is number 1 on the ranking list, and it didn't taste right. I've been off it long enough that it tasted like chemicals, and I was like, "Oh, what is going on here?" And then I didn't especially like the way it made me feel. And that was depressing. but I don't know. So I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna, I'll put it to you this way. I am losing too much sleep because of kids waking up in the middle of the night and all this other stuff. Like I'm having some real fucking rough mornings as a result. Quitting the caffeine was actually not that hard. I had headaches for like a week off and on, like not all the time, but there was maybe, let's say 10 days of headaches or whatever. And then that kind of went away and it was more or less fine. I don't know. I ran into John Drake at the Summer Game Fest, famed Diet Coke aficionado, John Drake, and I said, "Yeah, so I'm off caffeine," and he was like, "What the fuck?" And the way I described it to him is like, it's actually fine. Like I don't feel like I'm extremely low energy. I'm not falling asleep or anything like that. It's not like the highs aren't as high, the lows are not as low. It is more of this even keel of just like, yep, here's the energy I've got. Which is kind of nice in a way to not have it spike and crash and all the other fucking weird shit that can happen with just caffeine in general. It's the thing and this is what I ended up telling my doctor about it. It's boring. It's fucking boring. Which is what a junkie would say, but here we are. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to. I stopped at the store and I found this Hawaiian Punch Berry Blue Typhoon, which is apparently an exclusive flavor to Circle K, which I was not expecting, and figured I would grab one of those. It's rough, man. It's like my palate, it's like my tongue. This is probably fine. This probably tastes pretty good in normal times, but it feels like someone. It feels like someone has poured paint thinner on. Like someone is stripping a layer off the top of my tongue with chemicals, and that's weird. I drank another cup of coffee the other day and I did not like the way I felt afterwards. I felt like fucking like I was going crazy, which is kind of neat in a weird way because like I didn't like coffee was gross. Or rather coffee did not do anything for me like energy wise. Like I would drink coffee and feel like I want to go to sleep most of the time. Like I would drink a coffee and be like, "Oh, this is but I've had like two coffee drinks, espresso drinks, whatever the fuck. And they actually did what they are supposed to do. And I was like, oh, look at that. Wow. This is crazy. But I felt like shit, man. Like when I was up on it, if you will, it felt bad. It felt fucking bad. So I don't really know what the future is for me and this stuff. Like, again, I don't want to be drinking stuff every day, at least not right now, because I'm kind of easing my way back into it and trying to decide what I want to do with caffeine and energy drinks and whatever else. But the last week or so has been really hard with kids not staying asleep. Like I've, had like 2 hours a night and all this other stuff. And so that shit is rough, man. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know what the future holds. I will say that this Hawaiian Punch Berry Blue Typhoon tastes wrong to me. And that's kind of a bummer. Anyway, let's get into the news. Days after announcing that she was going to be overseeing the layoff of 3,200 Xbox employees over the next 12 months, with, of course, half of them happening already. Asha Sharma, the CEO of Xbox, has been named as an advisor to the U.S. Federal Reserve on jobs and productivity. What the fucking fuck? Video Games Chronicle has this story. I guess this kind of came from a press release because there were a number of people named to this panel, named as advisors on productivity and jobs. And in that, the Federal Reserve says, that one of her roles as an advisory role, of course, will be assessing the impact of AI, which I feel like that's a real, wolf in the hen house kind of thing. Like, hey, you want this person who's worked in AI before to be overseeing the impact of AI? I'm sure they're going to tell you it's great. It's real fucking, yeah, that seems like one of, it kind of just seems like a bad call to me. Not knowing her or what her strengths actually are as a person or leader or what have you, just outside looking in, that seems laughable, disgusting. I don't know, like with all of the layoffs and everything else, it just seems fucking gross. There's been some kind of additional Xbox news, really, but it's been, kind of a weird mix of, hey, here's what this studio is likely to be working on next, and here's where the rest of the stuff is maybe going, and there's not a lot of firm stuff there. Bloomberg is reporting that Obsidian is now going to be working on a new Fallout game. This comes at the expense of Avowed 2, which it sounds like has been canceled. Which that doesn't. So, if they're going to be adapting an existing game into making it a full-on Fallout game because they did have a project that seemed like it would fit that bill, maybe that'll be the direction they'll be going in. It's a shame because Avowed is a really strong, opener. And I think that they, continuing to iterate on Avowed, I think would pay off for them. But I get the news that someone is working on a new Fallout game should be good news. Instead, it comes off as desperate news. And that doesn't feel great. There's been, so I don't know. The other thing that's been happening is you have people, and this is always a really tricky fucking thing, right? You have people who are still employed at some of these companies who, kind of survived the layoffs, kind of getting out and saying or pushing back. There's been a lot of reporting that id Software is basically a support studio and there's only one person working on the engine, and everyone who did any kind of writing at Obsidian is gone. Kind of as the dust sort of settles around this stuff, there's been a little bit of pushback on some of that reporting. It sounds like that Obsidian specifically is saying yeah, no, we're working on new projects. We got stuff in the works and what have you. It has basically said the same thing. This was from the id Software Twitter account. And so no name is on it. It doesn't, I don't know. This is a weird, there's a real, I don't know. Here's what id put out on the 10th. Thank you all for the support this week. While our studio was impacted, those changes were spread across teams. We still have the crew we need to build the games and tech we're known for. The team today is about the same size we were when making Doom 2016. We have always had a flat studio where everyone is a maker, and we will remain true to that philosophy going forward. We are focused on supporting each other and the team members impacted. We're going to keep building the great games and tech that have defined us for the past 35 years, and we're looking forward to seeing you at QuakeCon this August. So, the reporting there was like, oh, it is basically, going to be incapable of making a game on their own after these layoffs. And so this is the studio account, again, with no individual's name on it. Saying, hey, no, we're still going to be able to make games. Which is probably the case, but at the same time, I think like there's something kind of crass about this. It feels like damage control that would come from a much higher level, even potentially outside of id or Obsidian, to say, hey, make sure that people know, like, and it like, when's the right time to say that? When's the right time to say, no, we're moving forward, while also kind of saying, hey, it's a shitty. It's a shitty situation all around. Like you feel for, obviously, first and foremost, you feel for the people who lost their jobs. Like that's a fucking terrible situation, especially on the heels of them shipping something to be like, oh, by the way. And you feel that for the people that kind of have to pick up the pieces and move forward too. There is sort of a survivor's guilt, and there's, there is a certain amount of trauma that comes with surviving the, like remaining employed through a layoff. Of course, that's, it's hard to give that too much in a world where some people are still employed and getting paid and some people are not. That's not really easy to go to bat for any of those folks, but it is, hey, it is rough to be on. It is rough to be a part of a layoff. It is rougher to be impacted by the layoffs. You get what I mean. And so, yeah, it's, I don't know. It continues to be a bad situation there, but that's not necessarily new news per se. This stuff is kind of continuing. And of course, it's hard to, even in a situation where these teams are still making games or whatever, there is still 1,600 people that are going to be, removed from their job over the next 12 months. Like that. What's going to happen on that front? You're left wondering, like, man, why wasn't, why were they so willing to let some of these studios go independent, but not others? Would it have been better if id Software had been spun out and allowed to go independent or purchased by someone else or whatever? I don't know. Compulsion Games is one of the studios that has now gone independent as a result of these moves, and they're out there looking for work. They posted to LinkedIn from their company page basically saying that they're open to doing work for hire type stuff. So, that they have a crew, and if you need help making a game, they've got a crew, which says to me that they don't currently have a project that is in full production, which would make sense because of the timing of everything and the timing of all of this stuff, that they would not necessarily be ready to rip on a full game. But it looks like they're looking for some work for hire type stuff, and I would assume that then they would get their own project up and running eventually, and maybe they will be of a size that they can do both. But yeah, it looks like for right now, they're looking for, quote, they are, quote, expanding opportunities to collaborate with studios across the games and entertainment industry. We invite partners to leverage the talent and creativity of the award-winning team behind South of Midnight, a game that was honored with a BAFTA award, a Peabody Award, and 7 Canadian Game Awards, and recognized on multiple Best Games of 2025 lists. With deep experience in creating acclaimed original IP, we bring our artistry, technical expertise, and collaborative approach to every project. We're excited to support the development of memorable experiences that engage and entertain players around the world. So, they've got folks ready to work. If you're a studio and you need some work for hire type work done, which everyone does, perhaps Compulsion Games will fit your needs. Let's take our last break, and we'll come back and we will finish the news after this. When it comes to treating hair loss, there's so much conflicting advice out there. There's just a ton of stuff. These shampoos and supplements and, all these office visits and go here and do that. It's hard to know what's worth your time. That's why it's great that Hims cuts through all of it with real, trusted treatment plans and a 100% online process. Hims offers convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments with ingredients that work, including chews, oral medications, serums, and sprays. They've got prescription-strength ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that can help prevent further hair loss and regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself, right? Hims brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. To find the right hair regrowth treatment for you. With flexible subscription options, access to 24/7 provider support, and once-a-day treatment options that fit your daily routine. It's straightforward, it's transparent, and it's designed to make getting care feel easy. For simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Jeff. That's hims.com/Jeff for your free online visit. hims.com/Jeff. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Individual results may vary. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Ubisoft Barcelona is on strike for 3 days to protest the layoff of 51 members of that staff. VideoGamesChronicle.com reached out in search of comment from Ubisoft, who responded to say, we're aware of the strike action announced at Barcelona today and respect employees' rights to express their views. Ubisoft has initiated a proposed restructuring of Ubisoft Barcelona as part of broader efforts to reduce costs and focus resources on strategic priorities. Under this proposal, the studio would focus solely on Rainbow Six projects, which may impact up to 51 employees. This remains a proposal, and so on and so forth. The striking workers are demanding the cancellation of these layoffs, stronger job security guarantees to prevent mass layoffs happening in the future, the return of the studio's previous remote working policy, which allowed up to 60% remote working, and promotion and salary increases they say they were previously promised. This team did work on the just shipped Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. According to VGC, they worked on some of the underwater exploration sections of the game. That game did well enough for Ubisoft to issue a large press release about how it is one of, if not the best opening for Assassin's Creed of all time. So even when the games are a success, we still see situations like this. Of course, like the problems at Ubisoft are deeper than any one game, and they, like, that whole company seems like a fucking mess. So yeah. There's been some loose reports about an updated model of the Switch 2. We talked about some of the battery stuff that will be happening in the EU. We talked about that last week, but this is about the potential of an OLED Switch 2, which I think everyone expects to come eventually. ZDNet Korea is reporting from a components perspective, basically saying, there's a possibility that Samsung Display will supply the OLED just like it did on the Switch 1. And they don't know how much that'll initially cost in terms of, what sort of price increase that we might see as a result of some kind of new model here. There's no real detail here other than, it would be a 1080p screen, which makes sense because that's the screen on the Switch 2 initially. So you would kind of have to do that if you were going to do this. And that there's a possibility that product development will begin at the end of the year, meaning, that's not production. So that's probably something that we would see potentially in 2027, if not early 2028, which sounds a little better. There's something about getting a news story right now, maybe about a year in or so on Switch 2, talking about an OLED Switch 2 that you're like, what? Like, you just started selling this thing. Like, what? Hang on now. But this would give them an opportunity to fix some of the shitty HDR stuff that the existing screens have on Switch 2. And in a world where they want to sell more Switch 2s, why not sell you a second one? Right? But yeah, this is basically just a little tidbit of news, which of course Nintendo would be investigating this. I have no doubt that we will eventually see a Switch 2 with an OLED screen in it. It makes sense that they didn't launch with one because they wanted to keep costs down as much as possible for launch. But now as we get further and further away from launch, you start to see reasons where you're like, okay. Also, people are unhappy with the screens on the Switch too. So maybe, this would be an opportunity to fix some of that stuff too. We'll see. Dying Light the Beast came out 10 months ago on modern consoles. The game had originally also been announced for old consoles. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Techland has announced that is no longer happening because it would require too many compromises, according to Kotaku.com. After careful consideration, we have made the difficult decision that Dying Light the Beast will no longer be released on PS4 and Xbox One. Seems weird to announce that 10 months after the other game shipped, but that's probably the right move. I wonder how much these sales of older games have fallen off. I mean, a lot of games, like this is going to be our first year without Call of Duty appearing on old platforms, which is interesting. We're finally at a point where they can walk away from those machines. But now we're seeing some other games kind of step in and cancel some of that stuff. Do you think that 10 months since they shipped the other version of that game, do you think they worked on this version of the game like for most of those 10 months and only to decide, hey, we're just not going to do it? Or was it something that they kind of fiddled with here and there and they're like, hey, we're still working on patches and content updates for the full version of the game that's already out, and we're fiddling with this, trying to get it running, and they just eventually gave up on it? I wonder how much work was wasted. They claim it's not to leave those consoles behind. It just reflects, quote, the technical realities of development and our commitment to delivering the best possible experience. If you pre-ordered those games, you can get refunds. Which is, okay. Do you think a lot of people pre-ordered PS4 and Xbox One versions of Dying Light the Beast? That seems, I don't know. I don't know. That can have been a large number of people. I don't know. I guess maybe, there are some people that are still holding out, right? Consoles are expensive and they're getting more expensive all the time. So the reasons to upgrade to a PlayStation 5 seem bad in some ways. But there you go. I don't know. I feel like we're not going to see a ton more for those machines. I feel like Call of Duty is kind of like the last, big major franchise that makes sense on those platforms. And with them walking away, I think a lot of other, that will be a catalyst. That and GTA will end up being catalysts for people to go like, oh, okay, I guess new games are not going to come out on this thing anymore. Did WWE come out on old platforms? It looks like it did. No, looks like it did not. Yeah, sorry. I'm like reading a bunch of weird old posts about people talking about, man, search engines really suck these days at finding stuff. Anyway, yeah, that seems like it's been what, 13 years since the release of the PS4, is that right? Right. 13, 14. And anyway, that seems like a hell of a run. A way longer, a way crazier run than a lot of other consoles get. And with more than just a FIFA, you know, you had those games that were just like, I don't know, man, FIFA is going to come out for the next 9 years, but everyone else has moved on. That you definitely used to get that sort of scenario, but the PS4 and Xbox One have had a much longer lifespan than I think anyone would have assumed. And here we are. And that's it for the news. Some other little tidbits here. Pal World 1.0 came out, and they saw a big spike in players, and you know, some other things like that. But you know, we are kind of in that weird summer period. Well, I don't know. It's tempting to say things are just quiet for the summer, but I feel like we're still kind of on the back end of the Xbox news, and it just hasn't been a lot else going on. I think everyone is there's a real malaise around that stuff, and so yeah. But Gamescom is coming up. It's not that far off, and so there'll be there will be some new news about video games in the near future. And you know, like Microsoft is going to ship a game here pretty soon, like that Halo thing. I think, you know, the Halo campaign, I think it's still coming out in like a week or something. So 8 or 9 days. So yeah. Let's take some emails. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send your emails to me at podcast@guard.bike if you want me to consider them for the program. That is the email address. Brody from Lafayette, Indiana writes in and asks, what are the best beat 'em ups, or if you prefer, belt scrollers? What, you know, if we were to rank all of the belt scrollers, if we were to rank all of the beat 'em ups, to me, it's always been Streets of Rage 2 and like Final Fight 1. I only recognize one Final Fight game. To me, there are no sequels to Final Fights. But I would I feel like those are the games. Streets of Rage 3 is an interesting game that is in some ways overly complicated. Streets of Rage 1 is a game that I think is largely replaced by Streets of Rage 2. But both of those games have some interesting things going on. You know, I think you got to look at Double Dragon as like a really good early example of this style of game. It's funny, Double Dragon 1 is so stiff in some ways that sometimes it's hard to think of it as in the same pantheon as a lot of the games that followed, but it certainly is. You know, Konami did a lot of work here, obviously. Double Dragon 2 is an amazing video game. I think Double Dragon 2 is like a fucking fantastic sequel. I mean, you know, Marion gets fucking gunned down in the beginning of that game. It's the most fucked up thing I had ever seen in a video game up to that point. Like, they just shot her. I spent the whole first game rescuing her, and then they open up the second game and just fucking murder her, dude. What the fuck? Like, it's terrifying. Terrifying. I think you could, like, Konami did a lot of work here that is fine. I feel like some of those games have not aged super well. Like the original release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was like a fucking bomb went off in arcade. It was fucking massive. That game was fucking huge. It looked so good for its day. It's just a little hard to go back to because I think a lot of the combat is so simplistic. Turtles in Time solves some of these issues. But some of those issues are really only solved on the SNES, weirdly enough. Like the SNES version of Turtles in Time, I think, does a better job of just giving you more to do. But like the Konami stuff is all very simple. It's really bare bones in a lot of ways. Like I think that Simpsons game has always been bad. Like, it's never been a good video game. It's been cool because it's weird that they made a Simpsons game, and obviously the Simpsons were very popular. Some would say they still are. But it's just a fucking whatever ass video game. The X-Men game is cool because it's so big. It's a 6-player cabinet, and you're like, holy shit. What the fucking fuck? But as a game, it's kind of whatever. I don't know. Capcom had those Dungeons and Dragons games that are very well liked. I don't necessarily like the way that those games had complexity, the kind of elements of role playing that they attempted to imbue into those games. I thought was always kind of a little much. And so you have that, and then you have like all those fucking IGS games or whatever, like all the Knights of Valor and like all of that fucking, like every time you update HB MAME, there's like 40 new hacks for those games because someone out there loves them. Like someone in Brazil just fucking loves those, and they're just cranking out fucking ROM hacks every day. The Punisher is kind of a neat game. Like it has some kind of neat things going for it. Yes, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs also has like a billion fucking HB MAME ROM hacks. Like I don't know who out there is like fucking loves Cadillacs and Dinosaurs so much. AVP is kind of a neat game, yeah. But yeah, I think for me it really I think to me this conversation really starts and stops at Streets of Rage 2. I don't know. Like there's a lot of other stuff in there that's like good and cool and whatever, but like Streets of Rage 2 is such a fucking amazing game with such an amazing soundtrack. It is just the right level of like complex and has I think a relatively appropriate level of difficulty. And it's just a lot of fucking fun. And so for me, I think that's the sweet spot. Before that, yeah, you have stuff like Golden Axe. Like Golden Axe was a really neat game in arcades because you just never seen that idea of like, oh, we're going to get all this magic and cast these spells, and these little fuckers are stealing our fucking potions while we're trying to sleep, and we got to kill them. I'm going to fucking kick the shit out of this little fucker. And, like that's really nice. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's yeah, and then you get into some stuff like like Castle Crashers is kind of cool for what it is, That's a game that was maybe cooler at the time that maybe hasn't aged super well because other people have come in and done that sort of thing since then, but I don't know. River City Ransom's a hell of a game with its kind of like low-key role-playing game elements or whatever. Yeah, some people really like Dragon's Crown and Odin's Sphere and stuff like that. I never those are fine, but I don't. I have zero passion for either of those video games, I guess I would say. But yeah, for me it comes down to the original Final Fight and Streets of Rage 2. There are other games that are close that you could potentially have a conversation about, but that's kind of where I come out. Someone asks, is Rampage a beat 'em up? I think if you cannot walk up and down, you have made a different type of video game, if that makes sense. If there is no vertical movement in your game is fundamentally different than what we're talking about. Like you have not made a belt scroller if there's no vertical walking. That's where I'm at. Tom from Utah writes in asking about Asha Sharma's future and C-suite accountability. Are C-suite executives ever held accountable? Bobby Kotick, probably knowing full well what people thought of him, gladly took the cushy golden parachute, never to be heard from again. Peter Moore never made all original Xbox games run on Xbox 360 and switched industries entirely. If Asha Sharma doesn't right the ship of Xbox, she'll receive a huge severance package and go off and do something else entirely. I feel this is some Dark Knight Rises shit when Bane says his plan is crashing this plane with no survivors, but instead he was lying the whole time, knowing full well he'd bail to safety at the last moments. Meanwhile, the customers and fans are the ones left on the plummeting plane. That's a little dramatic, I'll say. So are those executives ever held accountable? I mean, they negotiate packages, you know, they negotiate to the best of their ability. They probably have people who negotiate on their behalf. Like I at one point came very close to getting an agent to handle that sort of negotiation because I am not good at it. But I don't know what her job is. I don't know what, you know, like her job is to come in and, you know, they're making some changes. They're going to lay a bunch of people off, and she is coming in and she is going to be the face of that. For all we know, she could be gone in 18 months. You know, she could come in, wield the hatchet, and then they bring in someone else who doesn't have the stink of layoffs on them and say, everything's great now. You know, there could be a situation like that. Like it's companies do a lot of stuff like that for a lot of different reasons. And the only reason you can get people to do jobs like that is because you're going to pay them on the way out. Or if they manage to turn it around, you're going to bonus them out and be like, okay, you did it. You saved the thing. Now here's your big bonus. Or, hey, you came in and you know, helped us along the way or whatever. And now, you know, you're moving on and you are still getting this. Like, did you expect Bobby Kotick to not, like you say, Bobby Kotick, probably knowing full well what people thought of him, gladly took his cushy golden parachute, never to be heard from again. A, jury's still out on whether we're going to hear from him again. B, did you expect him to just say, no, you keep the money. I've been an asshole. Like, what, you know, that's the pay package that he had negotiated. He should take it. If they didn't want to pay him that, they should not have offered it to him in the first place. The board should have said, no, fuck him. You know? Like, the whole thing is broken. It's not, you know, that accountability is not necessarily built into someone's pay package or bonus structure or whatever, depending on what the role is. But also, no one is going to directly throw someone under the bus on the way out by name or by like, oh, this, unless they've committed a crime or violated their employment agreement in some kind of dramatic fashion, because to do so would say, hey, this person that we put in this role turns out was a real fuck up, and that reflects poorly on us and our ability to find leadership. The board sucks. We're idiots. Like, they're never going to do that. They're never going to go, oh, Phil Spencer did blah, blah, blah. You'll hear things like, oh, the previous strategy was to throw good, you know, like oblique kind of subliminals, if you will. But they're not going to come out and say, Bobby Kotick really fucked us over. Like, it's just not how any of this works. But sometimes you take a job because, you know, hey, this is a really hard problem to solve, and I don't know if it can be solved, and no one does. But they're like, hey, we need to figure out a strategy to move forward. And maybe they'll do that. I don't know. And maybe that strategy won't work. I mean, that's ultimately, if we had to sum up Xbox for the last 5-10 years, whatever it's been, it has been that. Since the onset of Game Pass, it has been, okay, we are losing this console race. Like, that's no longer a differentiating. Like, we're not gonna create a great business by continuing to lose to PlayStation. We need to figure out what's next. They placed some bets. They created Game Pass. They eventually went and bought some studios, thinking like, well, this will be the thing that helps prop up Game Pass. This will be the thing that kind of turns the corner on this and that. Ultimately, if you believe where they are today, ultimately that didn't work out for them. And so now they're like, They have to face the music on the bad bets they placed. And they have changed some of their leadership team in order to do that. So it's just, you saying Peter Moore never made all original Xbox games run on the Xbox 360 and switched industries entirely. He didn't run away. He wasn't like, oh no, I can't get Tony Hawk to run on the Xbox 360. I've got to get out of here. Like, that's not... That would be actually impossible because of the business relationships and licensing and music and all the other shit that went into a lot of games of that era. If you were sitting there expecting Peter Moore to give you every single Xbox game on Xbox 360, no one reasonable ever actually seemed to think that was going to happen. I actually think Peter Moore has done quite well as an executive in this business. It's a shame in some ways that he has switched industries entirely, though good on him for getting the fuck out. Smarter than the rest of us. God damn. So yeah, I don't know what you're really expecting here, but like, no, that is not what accountability looks like in this space. Accountability looks like, hey, we gave you a lot of rope. We gave you a lot of leeway to place these bets. We backed you on all of this strategy that you came up with. It didn't work out. And now it's time for you to move on. And we're going to do that in a way that is gentle. We're not going to issue a statement saying we fired that motherfucker. Our CEO's a dick. Fuck him. Like, it's going to be like, hey, okay. Like, someone's going to come tap you on the shoulder and say, it's time to go. And then they're going to negotiate whatever that transfer is. And you're going to stay on it as an advisor for the next year or whatever to make it seem like a seamless transition and all of that other shit. So, yeah, it's just not, it's like people say, I've decided to go, yes, exactly. I've decided to retire and go spend more time with my family. There's a lot of stuff like that in this space. Like, that is not always the reasoning, but hey, shit happens, man. I don't know. Let's see. Carl from Sheffield. How did you feel about Nintendo agreeing to games being sold for the original Switch that were just the normal plastic case, yet all they contained were codes to download the game digitally, no cartridge, just a code? A physical box that had to be manufactured, stored, and distributed. It can sit on a shelf, yet it contained nothing but a digital code. It seems wasteful and a little odd that it even existed. Why produce a plastic box in the first place? I only purchased one game that was like this, and it was the Marvel collection, as it was a gift for my son, though I think about it often enough to ask, is it possible for Sony or Xbox to take a similar approach to deliver their digital-only future? What would the preferred alternatives of content delivery be if discs are really done, yet games will still be in stores to purchase? So I think that sucks. I think going and manufacturing a full case and putting nothing in it, I think is shitty. It's just wasteful. But the reason they do it is because part of the reason you're buying a physical game is because you might be wrapping it up as a gift, and you might be like, I've got to put something under the tree, and here's this. And so at least a box is a box. A lot of modern digital, so you can walk into a Best Buy and you can buy digital versions of Xbox games and PlayStation games right now, but they are all cards. They're all like little hang cards that are hanging on a tab, and you pull it off and you take it up and like a gift code or gift card or whatever. They've done that for a long time. And that's much less waste. It's not a big plastic box that you're making. It's just, here you go, here's the code. And I think that's a much more rational and normal way to do it. But it does look a little less impressive if you're handing someone a gift and it's an envelope. And some people care about that. Some people care about the appearance of, like, look at this big box. So sometimes people go and they get a gigantic box and they fill it full of garbage. And then at the bottom of the box is the $400 in video game codes or, whatever. You're like, oh, look, oh, okay, ha ha ha. Like people do silly shit for gifts, right? But I don't like the waste of manufacturing the plastic and distributing the plastic and all of that stuff. I think is really just silly. So, So yeah, I doubt that like when we get to this future of like when we get to the PlayStation and when we get to 2028, assuming that they don't change course, I think that they would continue to do like the hang tab card thing and not go and manufacture full on boxes and cases or whatever. You could see a situation where they do, because they'll still want to do collector's editions for games, right? They just won't come with the game. And we've seen some of that where it's been like, hey, buy the collector's edition directly from our website. And please note, collector's edition does not include a copy of the game. And they do that because they want to make an agnostic thing that doesn't have to be paired with a console. They don't want to go like, oh, we had to make 10,000 Xbox and 10,000 PlayStation, and it turns out we only sold 1,000 Xbox and we sold out a PlayStation on the first day. Whoops. So instead they go like, okay, we're just going to put the statues and the fucking steel book, fucking art book and, whatever else in this case. And it'll come with just the physical stuff. And if you want to pair that with a copy of the game, we'll sell you both at the same time. But ultimately, it's just some shit. Hey, do you want to buy some shit in a box? Yes. To me, that defeats the purpose. The idea of a collector's edition version of the game is that it comes with the game. So when they break those apart and they go, it just fundamentally becomes like, do you want to buy a statue of a fucking dragon? Fucking a car? For the special edition of Dragons, car fuckers? No, I don't. I would consider buying a collector's version of a game. But the thing that always swayed me on collector's versions of games is that it came with video game content. Like, hey, if you buy the expensive version of this Mortal Kombat game, you will get fucking Scorpion's head to put on your shelf, but also it comes with classic Mortal Kombat skins. Like, I don't think I want a Scorpion for my shelf, but I do fucking want classic Scorpion skins because I'm exactly that type of fucking idiot. I mean, I have the Modern Warfare 2 night vision goggles sitting here with Roy back here on top of my Smash TV cabinet. So, believe you me, I am a sucker. Actually, I think they sent that to me. To be fair, they sent that to me. I did not have to pay money for the night vision goggles. They sent me a collector's edition version of the game. But yeah, I think that they should not put codes in boxes. I think it's gross. Alex from Brooklyn is here and asks, Is Game Pass not a cash cow? With the recent news of Game Pass subscription numbers dropping from 34 million to 30 million subscribers, I was thinking that even at an average subscription being $20 a month, that is $600 million of revenue coming in every month. Does it even cost half that to maintain the service, pay for development of first party, and bring in third-party games into the service? In other words, is Xbox even spending half of their hypothetical $600 million figure? A budget for Spider-Man 2 being $350 million for comparison every single month to keep Game Pass competitive, or all the layoff events of last week are a matter of not enough growth. After all, their expected subscriber volume is 70 million. I realize operations of Game Pass is a black box, but would appreciate any insight and analysis that you can share. So, I mean, there are still a lot of people that work at Xbox. Salary in a lot of cases ends up being one of your largest expenses when it comes to developing a game or doing damn near anything. And so you got to pay people. And then when it gets to third-party stuff, you've got to do those deals. You've got to pay research and development for consoles. Like all of your revenue is going to that sort of stuff, Game Pass included, right? You're like, okay, what's the future of Xbox look like? We've got to go manufacture these boxes. We've got to do this. And so like all of that revenue and then some gets spent. And, in a world where they had hit 70 million subscribers for Game Pass, that amount of money coming in probably covers the additional expenditure that they took on by buying Activision Blizzard, which, remember, was billions of dollars. on top of now you have to pay the salaries of all of these people that you just bought, and all of these studios that you know now own and have to pay rent on, and you have to pay the light bill to keep the lights on at Treyarch and Infinity Ward and Raven and every, you know, everybody else. Like there's, you know, like there's a ton of stuff you have to pay for. All of your server infrastructure just to store builds of games. And this is like minor shit compared to some of the other stuff, but you've got to have a whole infrastructure on a per studio basis for like, here's our control system for checking in code and this and that. We're working on patches. We need a billion TVs down in the QA lab to QA this stuff. We need, every single person needs to now have a PlayStation because we're shipping games on PlayStation. Oh, wait, no, we're not. Now we need a warehouse to store these PlayStations we aren't using anymore, and we need to pay for that. You know, there's just a lot of everything. I mean, again, the majority of your costs almost always go into salary. Headcount is always the most expensive thing in most businesses. But there's a ton of other stuff as well. And then on top of that, you're paying, you know, however much for a Game Pass deal to get a day one game on Game Pass or whatever. You know, you're funding those games in some ways. So that goes on top of all of the internal games that you're funding. And then you've got internal games that you're funding that don't come together. And so you've been paying salary to a team, and then you canceled their game. And so you kind of got nothing out of it other than potentially a tax write-off. And so, yeah, you know, $600 million a month sure sounds like a lot of money. But when we talk about the, you know, the overall operation and everything else, like all of that stuff kind of starts to go pretty fast. So that's kind of why they're in this position, right? It's like, hey, that, you know, Game Pass isn't making enough, but also they aren't selling enough consoles, and also they aren't selling enough copies of their games. And, you know, like it is sort of a knock-on effect across the entire business. It's not just the Game Pass numbers. So that's not that without having like true insight into those numbers. To me, that is the most likely scenario here. Is like, yeah, no, that's sure. Yes, to you and me, let me tell you, if I made $600 a month, I don't know what the fuck I would do with it. I'd probably still do this podcast, because what the fuck else would I be doing? You know? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't. It's like, what do you? I'm gonna go sit on a beach and drink my. You know, I don't even know what you. I don't even know. I'd be playing N64 games, but this garage would have a much tighter seal on it, so the air conditioning would work better than it does. That would be the difference. There would be signs. Let's see. Rick writes in. It says, in a recent podcast, you mentioned that it would be bad for the industry if Xbox left the console business. I'm a pessimist and think that Project Helix is likely the Xbox Dreamcast ahead of Microsoft pivoting exclusively to being a publisher and storefront service. Unrelated, I just watched a video from Quinn Nelson about how he thinks Apple should enter the gaming console and handheld business. He didn't even couch this from the perspective that some major tech company has a rare opportunity to scoop up a lot of newly available talent in gaming hardware and software. He was focused on how Apple has made a lot of progress on their own Proton-like emulation layer, the game porting toolkit, and their SoC technology being capable of providing console-like experiences. However, my mind tied these two things together. Microsoft broke into the console gaming market in the downfall of Sega. Apple has a new hardware-minded CEO starting this fall. A lot of the conditions point toward there being some sort of vacuum in console gaming, and Apple loves that sweet service revenue. Also, Apple is one of the few companies that has enough scale to get relative deals to whatever degree they exist in component pricing these days. It is possible they could undercut Nintendo on a handheld and maybe even Sony on a console and still make a profit. Especially true once the AI data center boondoggle goes bust and Apple doesn't have another half dozen or so extremely large purchasers to compete against like they do right now. There's no indication that Apple has any interest in this, of course, but do you think that someone like Apple will fill the vacuum left by Xbox, or will something entirely different emerge? Nintendo decides to make a more tech specs aggressive console in the next generation? Are we finally about to see the year of the Linux desktop, but they're all running SteamOS? What do you think? I don't. Apple is not known for making affordable hardware. I'll say that up front. Even in the best of times, they are not. They are not out there making razor thin margins on any of their devices, right? Like phones are $1,000. Phones cost you could get a Steam machine or a telephone. Which one are you going to choose? So classically, Apple has not been interested in video games. And a lot of that was the story you always heard there was specifically Steve Jobs didn't give a fuck about video games. And so he would take pitches over the years from game companies and this and that. And, they would, because they were trying to make something that was developer focused at times, there were moments in time where Apple had really good hardware that could run games almost as a byproduct of them making really good hardware. And it's rarely gone beyond that, largely because classically the company has not been all that interested in games. They get when they do their big announcements these days for a new phone or whatever, they'll get one or two companies that are doing games to come out on stage and say look at this, we made Punch-Out but with swords. It's big. It's a big deal. Or whatever. Back in the day, John Carmack would show up and be like, here's fucking, you can download the Quake test, but Q3 test only runs on Macs. Fuck you. And then he gets off stage and you're like, wait, no one has one of those. How do I play Quake? What the fuck is happening? Why do you hate us? Halo, obviously, was a Mac game for a good long time. So their efforts in gaming have been very scattershot in the years since then. Every handful of years, you would hear some kind of behind-the-scenes story of Apple's doing some kind of skunkworks thing, and they have an interest. It seems like Apple's on again. They're trying again to do some kind of thing, whether that's a console, whether that's whatever. There's no immediate indication as to how serious they are or whatever. But developers would get outreach and be like, oh, I guess we're talking to Apple about something. And most recently, and by most recently, I think this is still at least 10 years ago now, if not more. Jesus. But the thing I've always said is that Apple had a controller that they were showing people. Because at this point in time, Apple has the Apple TV. They've got phones. They have this kind of they have products out there that are theoretically capable of running games. They just don't have a controller. And currently, they sell PlayStation controllers. If you want to do that, they'll sell you a fucking DualSense, which is weird. But the story was Apple has a controller. They're showing it around. It looks like they're trying to do something serious with games, and so they've been showing us a bunch of controller prototypes. They haven't really talked specs with us outright, but the feeling was okay, maybe they'll do an Apple TV that is more capable, and that'll end up being their game machine. And so they're just selling a controller for Apple TV, and they're trying to drum up developer support for all this stuff, so they have something to announce it with. But it never really felt like a big deal. It never really felt like a major deal that was oh, this is going to be huge. It was more yeah, I don't know, Apple's sniffing around again, and they say they have a thing, and we don't really know what to make of it, and we're taking some meetings with them. And so I, heard from people that had this prototype Apple controller in their fucking studios. They weren't doing anything with it really, but they had one. And then the talk dried up, and that was that, and it all sort of just oh yeah, I don't know. And now Apple Arcade is a thing, and now they have a subscription service for games, and they're paying people to make exclusive games for Apple Arcade. But it seems like that service has largely, or not largely, but a good chunk of the games that appear on that service are actually like old iPhone games that are being updated to not have ads or microtransactions and re-released. And then they just put a plus at the end of the title. It's like, okay. Like, they don't go and correct any of the weird loops or any of the weird progression bumps that they hit because they expect you to spend money in some of these games. So they just kind of do this thing, and it's a very fucking weird way to go. But it's allowed them to revive some games that, you know, didn't necessarily run, you know, like at some point, some older iPhone games stopped working on modern hardware. And so there's stuff like Ridiculous Fishing that got re-released on Apple Arcade, and that's kind of cool. But there are not enough cool games on Apple Arcade for me to want to pay for it. I just took a month-long trial from Apple Arcade recently, and like most of what I had access to was just, I don't really want to play any of this stuff. None of this is, I don't really care about any of these hard enough. There's been talk, I don't know, that I feel like we're due for the hey, Apple has a game thing again, and we'll see if that actually manifests or not, or which direction it comes from, or whatever. But that's a very murky thing right now, as far as I'm concerned, and it's very hard to track down any real information about such a potential thing. But you're right that they are, leadership is changing over there. I don't know. Like the existing Apple consumer, the existing iPhone owner or whatever, has already had multiple opportunities to spend way too much money on games that run on their phone, and no one cared. Like Capcom put like Resident Evil games onto iPhone and charged full-on video game prices for them, and no one fucking wants that. So I just don't, you know, when you look at Apple's existing hardware, it's difficult to see a situation where that immediately fits, and you go, okay, here's a space for premium games and people that will be willing to pay those prices for those games. It's just not a part of Apple's setup right now. And so unless something dramatically changes, unless some video game maker decides to step up and say, hey, we've decided to support Apple hardware in a very major way, which would be weird. I don't really see how that would happen. I just don't see Apple as having the actual interest in this, unless they're doing something really strange. There are a billion ways that anything could go, right? Like if they had the desire, if they felt there was an opportunity, or if someone came to them and said, hey, with your hardware, we think there's an opportunity to do something in games, and we would like to take this in this direction, it's possible that Apple would have more interest. What if the handheld PlayStation 6 was powered by M-series Mac architecture? Probably impossible, but like Apple is doing really great at making fucking powerhouse laptops right now. Like their chips are fucking cool. They're making cool ass fucking chips. What if someone said, hey, we think it would be cool to do something like this with these chips. We think it would be cool to make a more gaming focused device with one of these. We want to partner with you. We have the software side. You do this. You know, like anything is theoretically possible. It's just if those are big enough opportunities for Apple to divert any of those chips to anything other than laptops in a world where, you know, they can't quite meet demand on laptops, right? So, another scenario, what if the next Apple TV, you know, which they're taking forever to announce, what if there's two versions? What if they did an Apple TV Ultra and said, hey, we're doing an Apple TV that is, you know, priced somewhere closer to the, you know, high end of the streaming puck kind of Fire Stick sort of thing. And also, if you really care about this shit, we're doing a high-end version of this that is going to have, a fucking M series chip in it. And there you go. Like, there's nothing on the tech side stopping them from doing this. It's just a matter of, is the appetite there? And is there room for that in the market? And are there software developers that would line up to make a lot of games for it? Which is always iffy because, again, Apple's forays into gaming have been so shitty and so half-assed that I think when you go around to developers and say, hey, do you want to do this extra work? They're like, dude, no. Like, we're not bringing our games to Mac already. Like, we're not going to do this on top of that. Like, what's the point here? And so you would need to find ways to sell developers on that conceptually. And, that's all doable. Some studios do port their games to Mac. I mean, you can install Steam on the Mac, and, there are games that you would be surprised to see and go like, oh shit. I think it would be cool if Steam eventually extended some of its Proton stuff or used the game porting toolkit or what have you to make more PC games run on Mac the same way that they are making PC games run on Linux. But like, yeah, you can play Cyberpunk on a Mac and it runs really well. Like, the Mac hardware is fucking neat. It's not always as high end as like, hey, we have a dedicated separate GPU. Like, they're not necessarily competing, like for like with a high end NVIDIA card or whatever. But like, for what you're getting for, like, they are fucking neat, man. I bought a MacBook Pro. I have an M4 MacBook Pro, and I have not played a lot of games on it, but I have compressed a lot of video on it, and I've run a lot of fucking like intensive video loads on it, and it's fucking crazy how well it performs. Like, in that specific arena, it performs just about as well for like compressing AV1 files and some of this other stuff. Like there's stuff there that's like, you're like, shit, dude. Like, this laptop is as fast as my full ass PC. At that type of work, and it's really fucking neat. So could someone want to repurpose some of those for gaming? Sure, I don't know. Fuck, dude. Why not? I think there's a certain element of this that you're like throwing shit at the wall and trying to figure out what sticks if you're an existing player in this space. And if you're Apple, I think that's where maybe it falls apart, because I just don't know that Apple has a great reason to get into it. I don't think Apple has a great reason to really dip heavy into video games. So the question becomes, is there someone else out there that could? Amazon wanted to before Luna became a thing. They were out there pitching people on some kind of device. But that never emerged. And yeah, I really don't know who else would get into this space. Google did their thing. Stadia probably scared them away from games for a good long time. And so I don't really have a good, I don't really have a good indication of who else would be big enough to have a launch like that worldwide. Mason says 10 cents. Like, yeah. 10 cents interest in games seems to, or their interest specifically in Western investment has been dicey lately. I guess I just don't really think that there's anyone else that's poised to put something into this space. You can always say, just like, who makes chips, right? I mean, ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to just like, hey, what if Intel wanted to do a thing? They make some chips, and they need to find something new and exciting to sell because their existing stuff wasn't always doing great. Could they do something like this? Maybe. Could NVIDIA decide to do something there on their own? Sure, they could, but they're making so much money on AI stuff that they seem to not give a fuck about any kind of consumer grade hardware. you know? So until that fever breaks, no, there's not, there's just not enough appetite there. Or rather, their appetite for the other shit is so fierce that they would not carve off any of that energy, any of that effort to go and make a fucking video game, something as dumb as a video game console. I don't know. I just don't see that there being a lot of companies left that could really do that sort of work, that would do the R&D to just fucking architect the chips and do custom stuff. Because, anyone can do off-the-shelf shit and just put something together, but at that point, you're just making a PC. So why not just make a PC? And the reason is because you don't get the margins that you get when you have your own store selling games for your own closed ecosystem and blah, blah, blah. But there are already too many of those, and I just don't see that. I don't see that making a lot of sense. So if you're one of those people out there going like, Sega's gonna get back in, bro, like you've never been more wrong. Eric in Northbrook writes in and says, which video game console had the best development code name? Katana. Katana is the best. Is the best one of those. Right? I mean, Orbis is fun to say. Revolution is a dumb name. Dolphin's pretty good. Orbis. Give me a break. Yeah, I think it's Katana because swords are good. Let's see here. Let me find the next one of these. Tim writes in and says, I've heard you speak about embargoes as of late. This got me thinking about game embargoes and how ridiculous some of them are. I'm a trade journalist who also works with embargoes. I understand the reason for them and generally will agree to one when it helps make our coverage better. I would never agree to some of the things that streamers and even some journalists seem to, though, things like not being able to discuss certain parts of a game or your opinion of it despite having played it. It seems like the balance of power between journalists in the games coverage industry is almost totally in favor of the marketing folks and not the journalists. As a fellow journalist looking in from the outside, I wonder how it got so bad. I was an avid reader of game publications in the 90s and remember them being much more independent and editorially minded. When and why do you think this power shift occurred? Has it always been this bad? Is this to do with the breakneck pace of games coverage these days? Yes. My hunch is that the pressure to be first in competition is what pushes people to agree to these ridiculous embargoes. A unified games press could push back on this, I assume, but that seems like a non-starter these days. Yes, it absolutely is. That combined with the fact that there are far fewer journalists and far more PR people than there were a few decades ago, I think has led the industry to where it is today. I don't think that there are more PR people. If anything, there are fewer publishers and fewer jobs to go around in that space. There are a lot of agencies and stuff like that, but streaming is what did this. So, this email came in 5 days ago, and so the most recent embargo stuff we were talking about was around Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. And so I'll tell you about that from my perspective. I requested a review copy of that game. They sent me one. It had an embargo for when the review could run. And so that's all very normal. It also had another embargo for kind of like last look preview style coverage. And so when people started streaming it, and streamers are not journalists, it's a different thing. But when that streaming embargo went up, there was a large chunk of the beginning of the game that you could stream out or put on YouTube or, do whatever the fuck you want with it. Put it on a VHS tape and leave it at a bus stop, whatever you wanted to do. But there was areas of the game they said not to go into. There was, so it was, and that stuff is a very standard preview style embargo of like, hey, we only want you to talk about the first couple of hours of the game. And, obviously, this is not a review. It's meant for kind of late preview style coverage. This doesn't happen all the time. But like, I did not sign up for this to then do that. It's more that I signed up for it for the review. And then when they sent it to me, they're like, hey, by the way, you can also stream some of it on this day if you want to. Like, oh, huh. And ultimately I decided to post something for that embargo because I figured why not. But like the idea of preview coverage not having opinions or rather review scores attached to it, review style coverage of preview builds, that's a very normal thing to do. This is a very compressed timeline where literally the version of the game you're reviewing you can do something with here at the very end of development. And so that's where it ends up feeling a little weird, but the actual requests are not entirely out of line. When you think about it as a kind of final hands-on preview embargo and then a review embargo, that's not weird. It's just kind of frustrating because you're just like, I don't know, like I think when they try to say, hey, don't give your impressions of the game, which is how some of that stuff was worded for Ubisoft stuff, that gets a little annoying because you're doing a live stream of a game or you're doing a video. You kind of want to be able to say, oh, that thing that happened, that's kind of cool. Or, oh, I like the story of this so far. From what I've seen of it, this is that. Like there are qualitative judgments you can make about an individual moment in a game that are things you would do in a preview style context just fine. But, ultimately the restrictions dictate that you're kind of not supposed to do that. Ultimately, I think if I had said in that video I put up, like, hey, I think this thing's pretty neat, no one was going to come to me and say, take that out. It was like whatever. And so, yeah, I don't know, man. I think that a lot of this stuff, again, live streaming being as easy as it is, I think is the thing that broke this. And the rise of people who are just streaming video games to stream them, meaning they're not reviewing the games, they're not there to deliver that type of opinionated coverage. So when you have people in this space that are just doing streaming and are doing that sort of stuff, I think that's where the power balance starts to shift a little bit, or that's where it sort of started to shift, rather. They want people talking about the game, but they don't want the danger of having people actually talking about the game. And so from a PR perspective, that's why you would put a late preview embargo in place that coincides with when you send the game out to a bunch of streamers, as well as the journalists who may have had the game for a week prior because they're working on review coverage, right? It's sort of a separate thing. The internet connection here has gotten spotty, and I'm not really sure what's going on, but this is all being recorded, so it'll all be fine eventually when it goes up later. But yeah, that's ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to, the way that streaming has disrupted all of video game coverage. The ease with which you can post videos of games or live stream them or both has really kind of changed the way a lot of early launch time framed coverage works, if that makes any sense. And I think that, ultimately it comes down to just like a turn of phrase or the way a specific sentence is written. When a company is writing that embargo, it goes from like totally normal to like, oh, that's kind of weird, or oh, that's actually annoying. Like if I'm to uphold the spirit of what you're telling me, then this coverage is very neutered compared to what I would normally do. But there are plenty of people out there streaming video games that just don't do that sort of stuff. They're not there to review games. They're there to I'm just here to have a good time, bro, and let's stream this thing, and that's fine too. And so it in that specific case, I think it was just meant to cover both of those things. There's nothing that weird about it. And in the vast majority of cases, embargoes are built that way, just like, oh, it's a very normal thing. It's like, okay, we want all the coverage to appear at this time, which is good because then it gives you time to finish the game and prepare your coverage and do all that sort of stuff. The reason that you would agree to an embargo in the first place. you could always this is kind of one of the side effects, one of the kind of final impacts of physical games going away will end up being the people that are out there streaming a copy of a game that leaked out of it fell off a fucking truck in the UAE, and then someone sold 40 copies on eBay, and then, like whatever, like 2 weeks early or whatever. The Video Games New York, the store in New York that would frequently sell games before their street date and would not give you a receipt when you did so, because they did not want, and no records. Don't wear a wire in there. The end of physical games will be the end of that concept. That we ran into that a couple of times. We got Modern Warfare 2 from New York because they were not sending us early copies of the game. And so I ended up getting a copy. It was only like a day or two early. I ended up with a copy of Super Mario Maker 2 about 3 days before release. And this had to be overnighted from New York, mind you. But I ended up having that kind of early. I ended up having that ahead of their review embargo because they were not sending it to us. And so like that stuff will go away as we lose physical games, like the idea of getting an early copy of a game and being able to sidestep these fucked up embargoes or whatever. Sidestep some publisher has a grudge with you and will not send you a game, and so you say, well, fuck them, we'll get it ourselves. There was a brief period of time in the early days of Giant Bomb where we were talking about starting a retail operation. Specifically because if we were getting games from distributors to sell, it would be very easy for us to pop one open and fucking play it and not have to deal with any of this shit. Of course, you would still have to work within reason, because if you just popped open a game the day you got it from the distributor, eventually the distributor would probably fucking cut you off because they would be pressured by the publishers and they would know, like, hey, this fucking website decided to become a fucking video game retail operation and are now fucking leaking games left and right. Like, put a stop to it. They would hammer down on that down the chain. They would have smashed that into the fucking dirt. But it was we discussed it briefly. But the pros and cons of it, of just like, yeah, that would be really fucking awesome, and it would last for about 3 months before if we used that the way we would want to use it, it would have just never worked out long term. But yeah. Let's see here. Noah writes in with a let's charitably call this a bad idea. I get where you're coming from, Noah. Noah from Newark writes in and says, do you think Xbox can ever become a viable platform under Microsoft again? Personally, I'd love to see the business trimmed down and get sold to Nvidia. They could do something really interesting with Xbox by building a high-end RTX console. Also would be cool to see Xbox handheld powered by RTX Spark. What do you think? Yeah, that's a terrible idea. No, Nvidia would never give enough of a fuck about any of that to do it. Like, Nvidia is so locked in on, making AI parts as hard and as fast as they can, that the idea of them running a console business and all of the developer relations and everything else that comes with that, like, they would be terrible at that. I would have zero faith in their ability to actually do this, but also they don't care about it. So no, that would just never happen. Do I think that Xbox can ever become a viable platform under Microsoft again? I guess. That's up to Microsoft. That's up to Microsoft and their priorities and how much money they're willing to spend at the end of the day. You know, they can cut and they can cut and they can cut, and they'll eventually cut so much that there won't be anything left to save. There won't be anything left to make viable. If they cut so much of their first party operation and then try to rely on third party to pick up the slack, third party will eventually be like, no, like this is actually maybe not a viable platform because you don't have enough games of your own coming out on it. It is kind of one of the arguments in favor of exclusive games for your console. It is the idea that like, hey, you're putting your money where your mouth is. You have skin in the game, as they say, because you are making a bunch of your own games as well, and you are marketing the fuck out of them, and you are trying to sell this console, and that way third parties can look at it and go, oh yeah, we want to sell games there too, because they've sold a lot of this console because people want to have this handful of games or whatever. It's not really how it works anymore either, honestly. Like if we're being honest with ourselves, you know, we live in a world dominated by fucking Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite to an extent as well. And all of these ideas, it's sort of like the real reason, like when you really think about Game Pass and why it fell apart, it's because Game Pass is really good for a specific type of player that are not being made anymore. It's really good for people of a certain age. The kids don't want to have access to 40 different games on Game Pass. They keep playing the ones that they like. And that's the mentality, and that's the sort of stuff that they, you know, that's the way that they do things. And so the idea of subscribing to Game Pass so they can play like, you know, whatever, day one, you know, yeah, some young kids are going to be like, I'm taking a break from Roblox because the new Halo remake is out. Like, that doesn't fucking happen. Like, I'm really excited to see Gears of War. I want to see these fucking middle-aged dudes drink beer. Like, no. No, man. Maybe we'll take a couple more here if I can find them, but I think we're kind of nearing the end here. All right, Ross from Wisconsin writes in with a strategy from Microsoft. Curious as to your thoughts on it. I doubt Microsoft would already do it, but it seems obvious to me, though risky, and the current regulatory regime wouldn't stop it. He's got 5 steps here. His 5-step process for saving the Xbox. Number 1, remove all Microsoft games from Steam. Number 2, remove all Microsoft games from PlayStation, except primarily multiplayer games like Call of Duty. 3, make all PC games exclusive to the Microsoft Store. 4, make Project Helix a Windows box, including a backwards compatible VM for 360, Xbox One, and Series games. 5, profit? So this is what they tried. You know, this is the things that you're detailing are the things that they stopped doing because it didn't work, right? I mean, I remember talking to Phil Spencer about the Xbox Store on PC. And this idea of just like, you know, well, I mean, they're the home team. We've got to give them first shot at this stuff. You know, like I think I'm saying, like, you know, these games need to be on Steam. This is not some privileged conversation. This was in the interview. But it's a situation where it's like, hey, you know, like, you know, before they were putting their games on Steam, like, hey, these games should be on Steam. That would be really handy and really useful. It's like, yeah, but we make our own store. You know, you've got to try that. You've got to at least try that. They tried that. No one came, or not enough people came. It's kind of the other thing with Game Pass, you know, being exclusive to that storefront. People are voting that they don't want it. People say they don't want monopolies in games, but they sure love Steam and sure hate everything that's not Steam. You know? Steam's certainly not a monopoly, but I think if it was, there are a lot of people that wouldn't mind. People hated when Epic was getting exclusives. You know, when Epic was buying games to be exclusive on that store, people fucking hated it. Because they didn't want to make an account on another store and buy another game on another storefront. Which is not that hard. It's not like you had to go buy an Xbox to play the game. It's not like you had to go buy hardware to play it. You know? And I get it, man. I don't think the Epic Store is very good either. Maybe they will, when they make all their changes to it, maybe it'll be in a better place. But hey, so yeah, I think that what you're saying, like, this is all the stuff they walked back from specifically because it wasn't working, and the price of making games was going up and up and up and up and up. So at some point they're like, hey, listen, if we want to make our money back on these, we need to put these games in as many places as we can. And that's what got us to this point, and they'll scale it back in ways that they want to experiment with. But I feel like in a lot of ways, these experiments have already been done, and in some cases, they were done with a better lineup of video games, a higher quality, more exciting lineup of games, and it didn't work then. So to come out now and say, hey, we're gonna pull back, we're gonna pull some games back onto being Xbox exclusive. I'm like, yeah, okay. Are these going to be the games that are going to, like, people are going to go, yes, finally, I've got to buy an Xbox because I need to play Gears of War E-Day. I just, nothing against that game. I think it looks fucking cool, but I just don't think that that is a mover. I don't think that that's going to be something. So, you know, if anything, that feels more like a test, and they'll push in that direction and try it out all over again. But they did this already and it didn't work. So, yeah. Ross, I don't think that's the strategy, because at one point that was exactly the strategy, but they did not have the goods, and so they had to make these changes. Let's see here. Anastasios from London wants to be able to rent games again. This is a very long email. I'll see if I can pare it down a little bit. According to the data, the majority of people prefer buying games digitally on consoles, even if it is more often than not pricier than retail with no option to resell. Is the cost-minded group of people that just want to play games and move on to the next thing really that small that Sony is not afraid to alienate them? Does it not matter, because either way the volume comes from multiplayer games and everyone will buy the blockbusters regardless? Are the savings long-term from killing secondhand sales and stopping manufacturing of discs and drives greater than lost sales from people that will migrate or stick to PCs because an all-digital PS6 is not appealing enough? When renting games from stores went away, which I want to say happened in the twilight years of PS3, don't quote me on that, and modding a console was not really worth it with the advent of online gaming, I switched to buying games and then selling them when I was done. This is something that to this day is extremely cost effective. Even as a parent of two small kids, I can buy a game on release day, finish it within a reasonable time frame, and sell it back for 80 to 90% of its value, depending on how much of a good deal I got the game for. I played First Light. I played First Light for £5. It's also why I justified upgrading from the base PS5 to the Pro with the Drive add-on. Even though I also have a fairly decent PC, I can have the best of both worlds and offset the cost by choosing to play games when it makes sense on the PlayStation. This hobby is getting ridiculously expensive, and I'm already dreading the idea of buying a next-generation GPU and console come 2028 if I just want to keep up. Yeah, I mean, sure, yes. I mean, yeah, so... Yeah, it's great that you were able to play 007 First Light for £5. That's ultimately not good for the business. Like, that's you know, it's the way things are, right? And there are different pieces of the puzzle that move and shake for that money and what have you, right? Because you sold a game back for this and paid, you know, £5 more to get that, or however it ended up working. Yeah, sure. £5. But that's probably not great if you're a studio that is trying to make all that sort of stuff. But this is the thing we went through during the Xbox 360 when they were trying to find ways to eliminate used games. The era of the online pass, Project $10, where if you bought a game used, if you wanted to play that game online, you would have to buy an online pass in order to play it online. This was EA's big gambit. A couple of other publishers came along for the ride in that time frame, but this was them trying to at least make money on the sales of used games because they hated used games. The reality of used game sales at the time was that a lot of new game sales were being funded by the selling back used games. And so I think back then, if you had found a way to completely eliminate used sales, you would have seen a significant drop in the sale of new games. And so GameStop and these other companies that deal in used software became these weird middlemen of like this floating weird mush of money, where at one point a game was bought brand new, and then everything else is funded by this idea of these games going back used. And then as the used game stuff starts to, that inventory starts to rise, more people come in and buy those games instead of buying new games. But ultimately, those new games don't get sold in the first place if people can't make the money back by selling their used games. That was the concept at the time that was actually, that fought against some of these companies that wanted to push back and eliminate used games for good. It was this idea of just like, okay, this isn't like you say you want to eliminate used games, but if you did that, the volume of sales you would see on your games would actually probably go down because of the number of people. Like at some point the cycle's already running, right? And maybe there's a good reason to put a stop to that cycle on the business end somewhere in a very non-consumer friendly kind of way. But because that cycle's already running, a lot of games would take a major hit as a part of that. They tried the $10 thing. It ended up being frustrating. And I think you had a lot of players that probably just didn't pay it. For some games that were purely online, like I'm sure that those online passes probably sold okay. Where you're like, oh, I bought Battlefield Bad Company 2 used or whatever, and I had to, buy the online pass or whatever it was. But there'd be like fighting games and stuff. Like I want to say one of the Mortal Kombats had an online pass, but it might have been Injustice now that I think about it. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was MK versus DC. But I want to say one of the NetherRealm games had an online pass. But I just don't think, it's one of those things where people, it's a similar type of fallacy like when people try to attach dollar values lost to piracy. And they just look at like a torrent site and say, well, X number of completed downloads times 60 times 70, whatever it is, that's how much money we lost. Instead of saying like, yeah, I don't know, a large number of the people that downloaded this game never would have bought it in the first place. So you actually can't convert that into a full just number. It's not quite that simple. And I think the used game conversation is very similar to that in that it's just not that simple. And so I don't really know what the solution to that is. I think eliminating used sales completely ends up being a bad situation, eliminating physical copies of games and all of that sort of stuff probably ends up hurting a lot of stuff short term. It's always possible that long term that nets out for them in the end, or they decide, like who knows. Sorry, the internet seems to be having trouble again. Anyway, if you're listening to this later, you don't care about that. Anyway, I guess that's my point. Is it's not as cut and dry as like, oh well, we're going to eliminate used games, and all those people are just going to buy their games digitally, and it'll all be fine. Like not all of those players will convert because not all of them can afford to do so. They're reliant on things like physical games, and in some cases, used games, discount games being blown out 6 months later because they just want to get them off shelves. Like I think there's just a lot of stuff like that you look at and go like, these are all of these things are factors. And so it is not nearly as easy a thing to describe, as it seems. But yeah, that's the thing with renting games and libraries too. You know, like some libraries let you check out games for nothing. I could walk to my local library and I could pick up a fucking PlayStation game. It's crazy. It's awesome that you can do that. And that will go away as well. I think that's sad. I don't think games should be necessarily treated any differently on this than movies or music or I don't know, fucking cars, clothing, thrift stores. You know, like it's. I don't think games need to be different there, and I think that we will lose something in the process. We will lose a lot of players in the process that might not come back. And at a time when this business is hurting in so many different ways and looking for where the next players are going to come from and all that type of stuff, this seems like a very dangerous game to play, what Sony is doing right now. So ultimately, we will see. That's going to just about do it for us here. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. I'm going to see if this internet issue is something that's happening on my end, because that would be very frustrating. I had been having some internet trouble last week, but it was on the other end of it. It was all downstream and the upstream was working fine. So I will kick the tires on a couple of things here and see what the heck is going on, and plan to be back tomorrow when we can talk some more, theoretically, about video games. Maybe we'll even play some. I've been looking at this Angels Fall First thing, which is apparently not a new game, but it just came out of early access, and there seems to be some fresh excitement around it. So I am curious to get a look at that. So maybe I will have something to say about that tomorrow. Anyway, I am going to get going. Have yourself a good rest of your Tuesday. And yeah, I'll see you Wednesday, and then Friday we'll rank some more video games. Have a good one. Bye.